gas service offering in retail energy, and how are people serving customers with this offering. Thanks to Joe for getting us set up today. Just a quick touch on our agenda. We'll go through some quick housekeeping, introduce our panelists today. We'll get into a discussion. At the end, if we have time, we'll open it up for Q&A. Feel free to use the Q&A feature in Zoom or to message using the chat. And then we'll just wrap up and talk about kind of upcoming events. Some quick housekeeping for today. We want you to use that Q&A, so feel free to log questions, vote up other questions, or use the chat. And feel free to reach out to anybody after the call today. If you ever have any technical issues, feel free to reach out to Joseph Monroy at Enerex. His contact information is there. He's also in the meeting today, and he can help you kind of address any concerns that you might have from a technical connectivity perspective. Real quick, for those of you who may or may not be familiar with Enerex, we are a SaaS company creating technology to connect people to drive trust in retail energy markets. So we as a company are all about furthering competitive energy as a source of innovation and choice for customers with respect to how they use and consume and increasingly produce energy, as we see the emergence of the prosumer. Our company is a SaaS company, as I said. We're probably known best for our broker product called Sparkplug. We have a corresponding CRM for suppliers called Propeller. They meet in the middle through Exchange, which allows brokers and suppliers to exchange information. We have an online version of that called Exchange Live, which allows brokers, customers, suppliers to transact together. And then we have Craft, which helps suppliers generate commissions. And so, not meant to be an advertisement for Enerex today, but just so everyone knows who we are in case you're not familiar with us. And I'll start off the introductions here. I'm Nate Richards. I'm the CEO of Enerex. I started in retail energy probably over 15 years ago now. I come from the software side of the world. I studied economics and computer science and started a software company almost 20 years ago. And out of that kind of grew what is Enerex today. That's kind of an offshoot. I worked one of the last jobs I had before starting my own company was for what's now Centerpoint, was Houston Industries back in the day. And so very hands-on in both power and natural gas. And Houston Industries now today is scattered about the world in parts of Centerpoint, Symmetry, NRG, and RRI, many other operators in the energy space. And so that was kind of my first intro to the utilities world. And now we lead about a 100-person company globally, delivering software solutions to the retail energy world around sales and commissions and transaction management. So with that, let me thank Peter Brown, Melissa Cabuzzi, and PJ Sanzias for joining us today. And Peter, if you would, we'll just go across the screen here, just doing a quick intro of yourself. And then once everybody finishes their intros, we'll jump right into the discussion today.
Yeah, so Peter Brown, I'm a vice president within World Connect Energy Services, which is a subsidiary of World Fuel Services, which is a global energy company dealing with just about everything except for about coal and nuclear. I was running our global brokerage business until recently, very recently, and now I've taken over our global energy management group, which the only real difference is one, how we get paid, and two, the fact that we're focusing on much larger industrial customers in the energy management group.
Thanks, Peter. And with respect to natural gas, World Fuel has both a broker and a supplier in some markets, correct?
Yeah, so we do supply natural gas under the name of World Fuel, mostly in the mid-continent area. So kind of Texas, straight north. Gotcha.
Okay, good. I think it's helpful if you guys would say kind of how you play in the space of natural gas as well. And Melissa, we'll go to you next.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Nate. I'm Melissa Cabuzzi. My company's M&R Energy. We have been in business since 2002, and we are a natural gas supplier in the downstate market of New York. In addition to natural gas supply, we broker electricity for our natural gas book of customers, as well as into other states. And we also have an energy consulting side that focuses on just beyond the commodity. We focus on demand response, we focus on solar, etc. So we're really considered in a lot of ways our customer's energy consultant for all energy needs, which is an important role to be as a supplier and also as a broker.
Perfect. Thanks, Melissa. And PJ?
Yeah, my name's PJ Zonzius. I'm the Director of Large Commercial and Industrial Business Development for Gas South. I've been with Gas South for over 13 years. Gas South is a natural gas marketer. We're the largest retail natural gas marketer in the Southeast. We're in about 14 states. After we acquired Infinite Energy in 2021, and we have about 40% market share in Florida and 26% of the market share in Georgia. So we are not a broker. We are just a natural gas marketer. We deliver gas basically from Texas all through the Southeast up to Virginia. And we also brand under Infinite Energy in Ohio and New Jersey. We move over 300 BCF of gas a year. And we play in the residential market in Georgia, which is very unique. So we have 425,000 total customers. And then the CNI and LCNI space across the rest of our footprint. So we serve everything from a resident all the way up to a large city or an LNG fueling center. And happy to be here today. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Well, let's just dive right into the panel discussion today. The first thing I think it would be helpful for, the way this was framed is, can brokers make money serving customers with natural gas? I think kind of know the answer to the question. And I think more of the question behind the question is, what are some of the differences? I think from our perspective as a software company that serves the broker space and has served the broker space today and are serving over 10% of US C&I transactions through our platform brokers today, we see a lot of power deal flow. And we see less on the gas side. We thought, hey, there's an opportunity here. I think a lot of brokers came into the industry through the power side. And it seems to be certainly a bigger and a more well-known space. There seems to be sort of an untapped opportunity here in natural gas. And yet there are some differences, some different dynamics, some different things you have to know, some different expertise that has to be built and developed or accessed in some way through a partner. And so I want to start out with, what are some differences between the power and natural gas industry? Maybe starting with just an overview of markets. Power, we have ISOs at the wholesale, and then we have state level PUC regulatory oversight. What is the gas market analog? Peter, you want to start us out there, kind of talking about, you guys are a very national kind of service provider. Might be a great one for you to start us with.
Sure. So, I mean, your analog would be with gas. Again, you still have still regulated by state PUCs, but you have pipelines.
Right.
And these pipelines can be massive in terms of going across multiple states, or it could just be an interstate. It all depends. And every pipeline works differently, and you have to follow their rules in terms of how they operate. And oftentimes it's dictated by the size of the pipeline itself, where the gas is entering the pipeline, and how much storage is available to move in and out on that pipeline. So the more restrictive the rules, it's usually because there's less flexibility in terms of moving gas along that pipeline.
Fantastic. And as far as state availability, we know, a lot of people talk about 14 states where power can be transacted. Maybe it's 16, maybe it's 12, kind of depending on how you count available to be transacted in. what does the gas market look like in terms of where can you get a deal done for a customer?
I mean, if you're still asking me, Nate, we manage gas across the entire United States and Canada and Mexico for that matter. So deals can be done pretty much in every state. Now, as we all know, even with power, there are certain pockets within given states that for whatever reason, going to the third party market just is not available.
Sure.
But I've seen probably the same maps that you have and Melissa and PJ have. I don't necessarily agree with them because they tend to leave out a lot of areas that people are actually buying natural gas. So
Right.
I'm not sure why they don't think those markets are open.
Right. I was joking on our pre-call how you never see Texas as a natural gas state, yet clearly there are natural gas transactions being done in Texas for the right type of customer across multiple LDCs. So a lot of people don't know that for the right customer, you can definitely do gas deals in Texas. That's just one example of my home state that I know maybe best. But PJ, you guys, are an interesting story. You've been, Gas South existed prior to, the Infinite acquisition, but now with that, you guys have really spread out in terms of geographies you address. You talk about just regionality and how that drives gas suppliers.
Yeah, I mean, I joke all the time and I say in the natural gas business, every state is like doing business with a different country. And that's true from the whole chain of the customers available, the type of products you can offer, and the billing and the relationship with the local distribution company. So, when we look at our business, I kind of bucket it into a couple different groups. We have our wholesale business, that's just a trading business through our supply group. And then we have our origination business. And origination for me is your really large industrials, your cities, your asset management agreements. And, consultants play a key role in that. But there's different consultants in different markets of the business. And the next one down is really your industrial. And so the industrial space is really where, if you're looking for geographic expansion, is where most of that is. In the different states, you get outside of Georgia and Florida, at least in the Southeast, and there's a minimum daily or a minimum requirement that they have to have on an average daily usage, and it's pretty significant. So, when you're thinking about this, most of the states outside of at least the ones that we are in, New Jersey, Ohio, Florida, and Georgia, are pretty much wide open for commercial. You can call on anything basically there. But in those other states, you need to focus on really large accounts in order for them to have the ability to choose. But that's the interesting thing. If a company is using a lot of gas, and they have large facilities, they can pretty much make a choice almost within any state that they have a facility, and or they can leverage and make sure that they have the right tariff in place on the LDCs that they maybe can't make a choice. Normally you have some negotiation value that consultants can provide to bring down their rates there.
Fantastic. Let me go to Melissa. You had some interesting insight when we were discussing this, both about just how the physical delivery nature of gas slightly changes the way that works. And then also, I thought it was really interesting. We were discussing, is what's harder to do, power deals or gas deals? And your perspective was that, hey, gas deals are easier. Share a little bit about, what, from your perspective, what makes gas a simpler business? And maybe easy for you to say as someone who's been in the gas business for so many years, knows it inside and out, but share us with a little bit about your perspective, and then also kind of what are the things that are unique about gas product structuring that you see as a gas marketer and broker.
Sure. Excuse me. So why I would say natural gas deals are much easier than power, the components of a natural gas price are so simplistic, meaning you're really looking at, as Peter was saying, the transportation on the interstate pipelines. That's one component of it. And that it will all depend on which pipes are coming into a particular region and which are serving each LDC. So that's not really the broker's issue. That becomes the supplier, the ESCO, who's pricing it. So you have your transport component, and then you have your commodity piece, basically, which is trading on a NYMEX futures market and is transparent. At any given point, somebody could look at a contract further out and say, hey, gas prices are trading at 326 in 2024. Yeah, I kind of like that price. And then the only unknown becomes, well, what's the delivery charge going to be? So a gas deal can be structured, especially for your larger users, to be, like I said, pretty simplistic. Once you just determine what your interstate pipeline costs are, which we call basis as the industry standard for the term of interstate pipeline, is what's the basis? So what's the adder? And that's where you have your broker margin, you have whatever your fees are, and that's where the ESCO has their fees built into it. Then it becomes, where do we want to be on the commodity price, especially for the bigger users? And they can look further out. Commodity trades 36 to 48 months out on the NYMEX. So customers have basically can look at it in a menu of where prices are, and they could say to any one of us at any given time, you know, when 2024 starts trading at X number, we want to buy in at that number. Or if it's never getting to that number, you've got something to show you. Here's the highs, here's the lows for a particular year, particular month, and where do you want to come in at? So power, as we discussed yesterday, doesn't have that transparent NYMEX type commodity market to trade on. And then the components of, as you know, there's capacity. In New York State, there's a bunch of new clean energy standard charges that get added to electricity. There's a lot of regulatory changes going on that you may have a fixed price contract, but there's change in law because every other day we're having something new show up in New York. So there's a lot more factors that a broker has to be up on, and you've got to be up on your market too. I mean, in both gas and electric, but certainly we're seeing a lot more changes in electric, and we're seeing a lot more, you know, change in law language being implemented because of all the change towards more electricity, green energy, et cetera, in the various states. So that's why it makes it a little more difficult. And natural gas, I don't think we've had a change in law in 20 years that we've ever had to institute that in our contract.
And it's an older industry. I think that's another thing that maybe a lot of kind of people in retail energy who've come to the business in the last, let's say, decade, maybe in the heyday, don't necessarily realize that natural gas has been deregulated for a long time, and was really maybe the first deregulated energy industry. For decades, people have been operating in natural gas.
Well, I'll tell you, we're one of the few that started out in the natural gas business, and I won't tell you how long ago because that'll date me, but it's been a long time, and at the infancy of deregulation. But so we're probably one of the few ESCOs who turned into, you know, like we say, electric broker. And the power side of the book, we are approved to sell power. However, there's a lot more risk on the supply side, and I'm sure PJ can speak to that, to be an electric supplier. So we're one of the few that started out with natural gas and made the transition to broker power versus supply power.
Fantastic. Peter, I want to tie off of something that Melissa just alluded to, which is this idea of managing the product for customers. It's not this idea that gas products, especially for large customers, tend to be or maybe are more often actively managed than, let's say, a power product. Not to say you can't actively manage power risk, but talk a little bit about kind of this ongoing service component that happens in natural gas, maybe as differentiated power.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the big differences between power and gas is, if you think about it, in this country, we don't really store power. So we produce all the power basically as it's being consumed. That is not the case for natural gas. In fact, we can't actually produce the amount of gas we need at the time people actually use it. That's why we have to store gas in the summer, and we've got to bring it back out in the winter, because that's the only way we have enough for everyone to actually be able to consume. Because of that, it causes a lot of operational issues. No matter where you are in the country, when it gets cold, problems arise. Sometimes we have to cut off, or the pipelines have to actually restrict flow for customers because they can only move so much, and they have a prioritization in terms of who gets gas first. That then causes all of us in the industry that are actually managing customers that use natural gas to have to take action to change nominations, to discuss with our customers what they want to do. Do they want to throttle back their consumption? Do they want to pay the penalties that they're going to incur if they continue to use over the amount that they're allowed to use? So it does, I've always said, Nate, that power is a lot more complicated to contract, relatively easy to deliver from people in our industry. Gas is the exact opposite.
That's
As
a
I said, gas is
that's a good way
fairly
to put it.
simple. Yeah, but it becomes a lot more complicated once you start delivering it because of all the physical things that can happen. And then depending upon what your role is with your customer determines how much of that work you have to do. And the bigger the customer, the more work there is to do.
Yeah, you're actually taking a physical product out of a pipeline and then consuming it, rather than kind of drawing off of a frequency, right? In a DC or a converted to AC, you're really just sort of the spring of AC. You're sort of like reducing the frequency as you consume, and more energy is having to be put in. But it's not like the nature of a physical product that you're actually taking out of, and when it's not there, you actually run out. It's not like power where it's just a frequency regulation. It's actually physical product. More has to be put into one end of the pipe so it comes out the other end, and or drawn out of storage to keep that all in balance. So,
well, I mean, think about it. Brownouts in power are fairly rare and are pretty big news. We restrict gas flow every single year, all over the place. And now, 2021 was a bit unique in that, and PJ may know more than I do, but I think 80% of the country in February actually was under some form of restriction. It actually got that bad because it got that cold everywhere, which is a little hard to manage. But yeah, I mean, this is not a unique thing that we have to deal with every year.
So PJ, let me go to, oh, sorry, Melissa, were you going to jump in there? Okay. PJ, I wanted to go to you and sort of go off of that and talk about, as a supplier, what are the things about customers that drive pricing? So, in power, we talked about, I think Melissa was mentioning, you have things like capacity, demand, the efficiency with which someone consumes power, which is captured in that actual apparent demand power factor, and also their load factor, right? What is their peak demand versus their average effectively? Are they consuming the same amount of power at all times, or are they sort of very spiky? Sometimes they consume a lot and otherwise they don't. There's sort of a penalty ratchet in many power pricing structures in that. What are some of the things that drive a better price or a worse price for gas customers?
Yeah, I mean, at the macro level, right? Gas is pretty unique in that we have a lot of it, but really the kind of point at which there's constraint, which Peter was alluding to, is we have all this gas over here, but the pipelines are where we don't have enough pipelines to deliver the gas when we need it, when it's, they're sustained cold. And so, one of the first things that really determines pricing is where in the United States the location is. How close is it to the large pipelines, the interstate pipelines, and then what type of intra-state pipeline is it on, right? So that's kind of one of the key drivers is how close and how available are those pipelines to, say, for example, the Henry Hub or the different areas. And then what is the demand for gas in that area? And then specifically, what is the demand for the gas when you get down to even that region of the state? So, from a macro level, that's what really drives it. Now, when you get into the customer, it's really a determination of what is their risk profile. We kind of, a lot of times, what's really important when we're working with consultants is that they fully understand, hey, the cheapest price in gas has a lot more risk to it. And it doesn't, just because you contract on the front end of a contract that has maybe the lowest adder, that may be actually the most expensive product, depending upon how the customer uses gas during those coldest months. So it's really important for everybody to understand these components. And these components are, what tariff are they on? Are they on a firm tariff where, they basically will get gas no matter, only they're higher on the list of, it takes more constraints to turn them off? Or are they on an interruptible contract? So right there will determine one component of their charges, which are your kind of demand charges, or your capacity charges for that LDC. And then you move into, your gas supplier has capacity that they can manage, and they can allocate more capacity to a customer, but that comes with a price, right? And that reduces the risk of a customer. And then you get to the commodity portion, and all of these, different components, they have different levels of risk and they have different levels of price. But for the most part, the more risk you are willing to take, the lower your cost is going to be, and the higher operations you're going to have to do. The higher the cost, the more you'll probably reduce your risk, and the less work you'll have to do on these days that Peter alluded to. And we call those days operational flow orders, and those are 40, 50 days a year. So it's not 6 days a year that you're going to have to do this. We have an entire department that manages those days for our industrial base of our customers. So it's you need to work in partnership with the supplier you choose in order to do that. And so the biggest question that I ask our suppliers is, how much gas do you use? When do you use gas? What is the risk tolerance of your company? What are the contracts that you have with your customers? I mean, can you afford variability in your commodity? And what is the percentage of your, you can have a really large gas customer, but when you look at their total spend, it's a really small line item. All of those things are going to determine what type of product they use.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, let me, with that, transition us over to the relationship dynamic of brokers and suppliers. And I'm using broker as a catch-all term, aggregator, broker, consultant, advisor. But how do suppliers and brokers, we touched on a couple of ways, work together? Maybe I'll go over to Melissa. You're an electricity broker on one side and a gas supplier. You really see the world through both lenses, probably have a really unique point of view here. Talk about some of the things that you've seen in terms of either through one of those perspectives, best practices, or challenges in working between a broker and supplier relationship in the natural gas business.
Sure. So just kind of following up on what PJ said with regards to someone's risk tolerance, it's important for the suppliers to communicate to the brokers, what the product is. And for instance, like you said, the risk tolerance, and a lot of that can be mitigated by what we call swing, and determining with a customer, what kind of flexibility do they have? Can they take 10% swing, meaning that, price doesn't change for if they use 10% more, or what their contracted volumes are, their historical volumes are 10% less, or do they want to take more swing, 50% more, 50% less, and be price changes? So it's important to, as PJ said, to understand what your customer, how they're consuming. For instance, there are interruptible customers in New York State, not many are left, that have the ability to switch to fuel oil. And for that ability, they get a discounted delivery charge on the utility rate for delivery. And it also opens them up to potentially being interrupted by not only the utility, but the supplier, depending on how this contract is structured. Well, we found most of those interruptibles now have chosen to do a firm supply, meaning they want guaranteed supply into their region or their utility that'll guarantee that we as a supplier will not interrupt them. And doesn't stop the utility from asking them to switch over to their fuel oil, but it does eliminate us from switching them over in a time when Peter and both PJ are saying where there's constraints. So the constraints become hidden to the actual customer. If you've got them on a firm gas delivery into the utility, doesn't stop the utility from still interrupting them. So you have to understand how the customer is using it. And then in case of an interruptible customer, and as we're managing our IT pools, we need to know if there is a day off, are they shut down for a holiday? Is something come up and a piece of equipment's gone down? Recently, we had a bunch of hospitals decide to upgrade boilers and switch over to oil for a month without necessarily telling us as a supplier. Now, that becomes invisible to the customer because we don't have anything. They have a 10% swing, and so they're not penalized at all from reducing going into oil. But those are the kind of information you need to have, that open communication with your customer when there's something that's a little bit more, needs a little bit more hands-on, like an interruptible. Firm gas supply for most utilities, or our experiences, we just deliver, that doesn't get interrupted. We don't need to know if a day's been shut down. And then the amount of swing, 10%, 20%, that's between the customer and, you know, the broker to decide, and the supplier. So, and then, yeah, so what I was going to say no, actually, I'll stop there. Ask me.
No, that was a lot, actually. There was a very dense set of guidance there. I think at a high level, what I'm hearing is there's much more active communication between the broker around consumption and the supplier, which kind of gets to Peter's point earlier about kind of the inverse of the power world, harder to contract for, but consumption is pretty straightforward. This is easier to contract for, but then the consumption has a lot more hands-on kind of activity. Peter, you want to add to that? And then I'm going to let PJ also in on this question as a supplier. I'm sure he has some guidance of working with his channel partners.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with what Melissa and PJ are saying. I mean, we meet with our gas suppliers more often than we do our power suppliers. Not that we don't care about them. It's just there's a lot more interaction that has to occur. There's a little bit of horse trading that has to occur at times when things go really bad. You know, not everything is always covered by the rules necessarily. So we have to work together to figure out what the right scenario is. As Melissa's saying, we have to have a lot more conversations with our natural gas customers in terms of how they anticipate using, because using too much and using too little are both problematic. So we have to have a lot more communication back to the suppliers about exactly what's going on. And yeah, the choice of product is very, very important. I mean, I certainly know last year we had multiple customers that were on interruptible contracts that had never been interrupted in their entire history and suddenly were. And they kind of forgot that risk existed. And of course, you know, they're all trying to figure out who to blame. And you know, they've been enjoying very low rates, and it's like, well, that's what you get for it. So, and a lot of them, I agree, have changed how they do business going forward.
PJ, why don't you add from a large gas supplier's perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, I sort of there's two buckets, and it's kind of interesting. It also translates into kind of two buckets as far as how I look at, you know, consultants or brokers, right? You have your industrial supply, your large users, where, you know, we've talked a lot about the challenges, the complexity in that business, right? And what's needed in that space is what I would say is your traditional consultants, where it's really a partnership between the marketer and the consultant to deliver the service to that industrial customer. What's really important in that space is that the consultant and the marketer, the supplier, is on the same page on what that contract means. And one of the things where I've seen challenges in this space is the words full requirements, the words swing, the words firm, and how those operate, unfortunately, aren't as clearly defined in the industry as I wish they would be. And so what is really important is not only when you're structuring the RFP or you're talking about it, is putting in there what you think, but also what you mean. So firm service means for this customer, full requirements means for this customer, swing means for this customers. Because what I've found is where the real challenges happen is when the consultant or the customer has one understanding of what that means and the supplier has a different one. And so regardless of what terms you're using, it's really important that you say what those terms mean. When you get into the commercial market, it is pretty easy to transact on firm service. I mean, we probably do, I mean, I don't know, somewhere around 10,000 contracts a year. Most of those are in firm service. And, you know, that's a simple, probably 3-page document. You get a price, you fill it out, send it in. and it's pretty easy. That's where we deal a lot more with brokers. And the really important thing for us in brokers is, at the end of the day, it's our contract and it's representing our company. And so the challenges where we experience in that market is, one, we just want to make sure that we have a transparent relationship with who's responsible for what. We really like when there's an LOA where it's exclusive to that broker, because a lot of times if it's not exclusive, we're going to get pricing from multiple brokers, and we're broker agnostic in those situations, meaning we're going to provide the same price to each one. It's up for you guys to sell your value. If there's an exclusive relationship and we have that documentation, then we're going with the exclusive provider. But it's just really important for us as a supplier that we're represented in the way that our company wants to be represented. And so the transparency on that, and just making sure that everyone is comfortable with the transaction. At the end of the day, the customer receives the type of service they want, the type of customer service from a gas supply, and the customer service that they need. The broker business for us and the consultant business has been key to our growth over the years. We do about 30% of our overall transactions in the broker market, and I think we have over 200 consultants that we deal with on a yearly basis. So, we value that space, but we also, because we do so many transactions there, we do see where some of these issues arise. The good part of it is those are few and far between. And so, that's why that space, we continue to be bullish on it. And it's a really great space for us when we get into new markets. I call that kind of our Air Force. When we go into a new market, we go first into the consultant space and price and win deals there.
Fantastic. Could we take a moment and talk about broker fees? I think it's good to hear, although good and bad, I smile about channel conflict, that exists the same in natural gas. I think anytime you've got a channel sales type of relationship, whether you're selling widgets or decatherms, you've got potential for channel conflict and having clarity about whose customer is this and how's the supplier and the price being represented and accurately, and everyone having full clarity is always of value to all parties. But talk a little bit about fees, and this is something that I think is always of strong interest in the channel space. Is how do I make money in the gas business? And I'll let anybody who wants to take that one.
Yeah, I mean, I can start, I guess.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so for us, like, again, to me, I have this mantra in business development: create, don't compete, right? I think that, with our competitors, with our suppliers, with our brokers, our consultants, like, everybody can win. Well, the key piece of that is partnership and transparency. And, where we thrive with consultants is when that's a true partnership. Where once we have the customer, we're working together, and when we're pricing the customer, we're working together. The challenges, I think, come when one group feels like the other group is taking advantage. And when I'm working, or when my team's working with a consultant, and they continue to beat us up on price, and then they send the contract in, and they have $1 per decatherm on there, and we have 5 cents per decatherm on there. That's a consultant, that if they continue to do that, I've fired consultants before, and I'm fine with doing that if I'm feeling taken advantage of, or they're not operating in a manner which I feel appropriate. And so I want everybody to make money. And it's in my best interest for consultants and brokers to make money. I want them to do business with us. I want their business to be successful. I want it to grow. If their business grows, then we grow. And to me, it's just maintaining those conversations. I also think that folks need to recognize that the supplier is taking the risk. we are taking the receivables risk, we are taking the commodity risk, we are taking a lot of risk there that the brokers aren't. And, if I'm just being transparent, the margins the consultants are making compared to the margins the marketers making are pretty similar. And we have a whole lot more risk. And that's where the market has developed. And we're okay with that. But, for me, it's about creating partnerships and transparent and honest relationships.
Thanks, Melissa. Anything to add to that?
Sure. Well, one thing that PJ said, if you do have multiple brokers coming in to try to price the same deal, just like them, we would require a letter of authorization or letter of exclusivity. Because what we're not going to do is compete against ourselves and send different prices to multiple brokers.
Sure.
So that's pretty standard, I would say, amongst all the suppliers, gas or electric. And then regarding the fees, we work in a broker side of the business as well. And one thing that we know is we want to be very reasonable with our fees, because we don't want the next broker to walk in the door and say, M&R Energy is charging you $1 per decatherm for natural gas, or 5 cents or whatever, 5 mils or a penny on your electric. So if you want to have this customer for a long period of time, you've got to be aware of what fees you're charging. It shouldn't be the one and done kind of attitude that let me just make the money now and I'm worried about repeating it later. What's kept us successful and also World Fuels and Gas South is that, we're doing the right thing by the customers. We're being reasonable with our fees. It's about longevity and it's about being here for decades versus 1 or 2 years, and about being reputable. So as a broker, you want to be really aware of what your fees are charging. And how would you feel if another broker came in and accused you of overcharging and was able to prove that your margins are much higher? You're going to lose that business and you're going to lose that credibility. So on the broker side, it's about really building that partnership with your client to not only manage their electricity, their natural gas, or whatever else may be coming down the the energy market, because there are so many changes that are currently going on with the perspective of how states feel about natural gas, et cetera, especially in New York. So you want to be able to help your customer. Your role is to help your customer navigate through that for both their gas and electric. So to overlook gas for any reason, whether it's big or small usage, it is an important component to a customer's energy needs and energy budget. So that needs the same amount of attention as electric. And you need to look at what you're charging your customers so that they're going to be a customer of yours for years to come.
Great. I think 2 really great points there. One is that this transition of the broker to be a holistic energy advisor, not just a power price getter or a gas price manager, but to really be more of a holistic service provider for the customer about every aspect of their energy, I think is one great takeaway. And also that gas isn't just a bolt-on. It isn't just like an add-on, but it's a different thing. It requires a different kind of mindset to manage. But it's kind of almost a responsibility to deal with that customer's whole energy portfolio. Peter, anything to add on the fee side, or anything we've just covered around the broker supplier dynamics?
I would say, I definitely agree with what everyone else has said. The other thing I would say is I think, the conflict that sometimes can occur between brokers and suppliers, sometimes going after the same customer, it happens a lot less in gas than it does power. And I think it's just simply a matter of, everybody uses power. If you've got a guard shack, it uses power. That's not true of natural gas. So if you're talking about the huge industrials, that's one thing. But for the rest, it's not as cost efficient for a gas marketer to go out after the, 10,000, 15, 20,000 decatherm load, go knocking on doors. So it's actually, I think, sometimes easier for those to come in through a broker or a consultant or whatever else. So, and obviously, if you've already got the customer from a power standpoint, well, you've already done the sale. Now you just have to make sure you understand the other commodity. And the chances of somebody else coming in there and competing with you become much lower. So I definitely think in a lot of ways, as Melissa said in the very beginning, that gas is easier. Yes, you have to understand it, but there's so many components of it just because of the way it's consumed and who consumes it that you just don't have some of the issues that you have with power.
Fantastic. I want to zoom out for our last couple of minutes here before we get into to Q&A and just look at some of the macro issues around natural gas. I threw out two that kind of are top of mind for me, just from a headline perspective. Of course, there are many drivers this, but first off is electrification push. I mean, Melissa, New York, right? Obviously a marquee state around not just pushing electrification, but potentially also outlawing natural gas in certain types of uses, commercial, office buildings, and things like that. You want to talk about how you see that affecting natural gas, just the overall market dynamic, customer appetites to leverage natural gas as an energy source?
Sure. Well, one of the things we were discussing, like you said yesterday, about New York in general, trying to pretty much outlaw natural gas. And, that's just not it's not an easy thing to do. You've got your large industrial customers that gas is going to be the only thing that they can consume. And let's say it's an industrial baking. They're going to want to be baking with gas in large quantities versus electricity. And the thought that you're not going to have any kind of natural gas powering, fueling power plants, or maybe not necessarily oil and they're all gas converted, you're going to have natural gas. I mean, and just looking at what we've done in New York State by closing Indian Point in the lower Hudson Valley of New York has caused electricity prices to go up significantly. I mean, we've had a lull in our region. When I say lull in pricing, we're paying 5-6 cents kilowatt hour for gas. Fast forward 9 months after Indian Point closed, suddenly we're paying 9 cents. Some utilities are 20 cents or 10 cents. So at some point, New York's going to realize that natural gas is going to have to play a role in their portfolio of power generation, and the electrification push isn't the answer. And the other side of it, they're going to have to push energy efficiency more as well, make more programs available, get customers to consume less. But unfortunately, unfortunately, there's natural gas customers that they're never going to be able to use anything else but gas. There's just not a power, the equipment there they need, the ovens. I mean, sure, you can bake with electric, et cetera. But I just think that that's way down the road, and we're talking decades, versus just around the corner.
But as a Texan, I have to say, can you grill on electric? You maybe can bake on electric. I don't know about that even. I like that artisanal bread that's baked. It's got a little bit of that. You can taste the flame. I think there's a component there, especially in food service, where gas is just very difficult to substitute electric. But electrification. Peter or PJ, anything to add there, just from a kind of motion of a macro driver?
I mean, I think from a standpoint is that the natural gas industry just hasn't done a good job of telling our story. And we have a really, really good story to tell. I mean, you hear about the Berkeley, but when you actually look at the facts, 20 states have passed legislation that continues to allow choice to customers. So there's very few states that have, and it's really cities within the states that have been able to ban natural gas. So the larger movement in the United States, though it's not talked about, is actually states protecting natural gas. So there's 20 states that have passed laws. There's 5 that have proposed laws. So but that's not in the New York Times. That's not in the Wall Street Journal. Berkeley is. The other thing is electricity has to be made from something. So electricity, for the most part, is made by natural gas. Well, the direct use of natural gas is the most efficient way to produce energy. It's the most inexpensive way. So, when we passed in Georgia, our home state, the fuel choice bill this year, we had a coalition, and it was supported by both sides politically, because it's an issue of cost, and it's an issue of the availability of a foundational fuel. And so, for me, we're going to need all of these sources. We're going to need solar. We're going to need electric. We're going to need nuclear. We're going to need natural gas as a foundational fuel to get to where we need to go. And natural gas is the cleanest burning fossil fuel out there. And so, to me, we're seeing more people, especially in the industrial space, try to move to natural gas as a way to improve their overall sustainability, which I think one of the big drivers right now in the natural gas business, and what's really driving the electrification push, is really the environmental, social, and governance, the ESG pressure that's being put on companies, whether directly or indirectly. So electrification push is a output from people wanting to do a really good thing, which is to reduce emissions. But it's not electric or natural gas. It should be electric and natural gas. And unfortunately, you know, I think if you polled people out there and just said, how is electricity created? I don't think a lot of them would know that natural gas is actually burned to create electricity.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. You want to burn it in the power plant and then transport it over the power lines, or do you want to transport it in the pipeline that's already there and burn it, you know, selectively when to either drive heat, drive cooking, right? Different uses, hot water, and so forth. Obviously, that's very geographic how natural gas gets consumed at the burner tip. Peter, anything to add on electrification?
Well, just that beyond just providing the baseload power, I mean, natural gas is really the only thing that we have that can ramp up and down to meet the needs of the actual
Dispatchability.
consumers. I mean, you can't do a solar, you can't do a coal or nuclear. Gas is it. So I agree that it's not going anywhere anytime soon.
As a marginal fuel source, very difficult to replace gas. You can replace baseload or you know, peak with solar, hydro, coal, but as a dispatchable marginal fuel source, like what competes? Really can't. Hard to name something. Even batteries. I mean, think about the time. You've only got so many hours of discharge, so you're so limited there. Whereas gas, you can dispatch it and burn it as long as you want, and when you're done, you can switch it off. And so, yeah, absolutely. Great takeaways. Certainly, I think it's something probably universally known in our industry that it's a all of the above approach that's winning. Certainly, the winds of politics and news headlines will drive one way. You know, nuclear has, in my 43 years on the planet, has been our savior, our eventual annihilator, and you know, as recently as this week, right? We saw a lot of the social media and big tech companies come out as nuclear. I mean, even yesterday, I think there was a meeting to talk about nuclear and natural gas at the White House and how critical our natural gas infrastructure is, and how the government should be actually intervening to drive more natural gas production and consumption in the country, coming from Jamie Dimon. So I don't know if anybody read Bloomberg this morning, but that was a headline that I woke up to. So I thought that was an interesting topic for today. On global supply drivers, we're starting to wrap up here. Obviously, the war in Ukraine has highlighted this idea of energy supply and sort of how fragile it truly is, and just the global balance of energy production and consumption, with LNG trains being a 20-year long-term contract. You don't just say, hey, let's start bringing gas from Qatar and dropping it, you know, in Germany. That doesn't just happen overnight. And so, what do you think about global supply drivers? Just maybe 30 seconds from each of you, how you're seeing that affect us. Maybe just focusing here in the U.S. What's the ripple effect and how you're seeing that play out for customers?
Well, I mean, you know, 10 years ago, the thought of we built that 10 BCF of capacity to export LNG, and everyone was like, are we ever even going to get close to using all that? And I think we're at 13 now. And my guess is if we could double it today, the market's there. And it's driving our prices up here domestically, because what do we consume? Somewhere around 80 BCF a day, something like that. You know, so whatever that percentage is, 18% is going out of the country. And I think all that's going to do is increase, because in a lot, you know, we have relatively inexpensive natural gas. It's a lot more expensive in other parts of the world, taking the whole Russian issue aside. There's going to be a push to send more and more gas out of the country, because if you're a gas producer and you can get $14 in Japan versus $18.24,
right? Yeah. Some contracts.
Where are you going to send it? So I think there's going to be a push. My opinion, I think the days of cheap natural gas are over. because regardless of what happens here domestically, we're just going to send more and more of it out of the country.
Fantastic. Melissa, PJ, wrapping up thoughts there.
I hope that's not true, Peter, that the cheap natural gas is gone. From the consumer perspective, being a consumer myself, but I think the producer, what we're seeing right now, and Peter, you've probably seen this as well, that, when COVID was came through, and demand went to nothing, we were still producing the same amount. So producers started shutting in their wells, as we all know, and they're starting to enjoy making money. For years, being fracking was really kind of upside down for a lot of producers. So what we're going to see with this global push is that we are at max capacity for what we can ship out. We started being almost at max capacity in September, and then a few more LNG trains came on. But I think producers are going to start opening up the wells. They're going to get pressured to do that. And so I don't know that we're going to see these levels of $5.38. I don't know if we're going to get back to $2.50, but I think there's some number in the middle of that when producers start opening up again. So what you saw in the news today at Bloomberg, and I also read it in one of the other publications that we get, is that now the government's getting behind producing more natural gas, shipping more natural gas overseas. We're going to probably be more of a global player, but hopefully, and as a result of that, we'll be producing more domestically as well. And maybe natural gas will become more favorable, and certain states won't be trying to, eliminate natural gas or limit it.
Thanks, Melissa. PJ, final
Yeah,
thoughts?
I mean, overall, I'm bullish on natural gas. I mean, obviously it's a huge asset to the United States. It's even more so now. So the biggest thing that's driving pricing, in my opinion, is the pipeline, the capacity restraints. So, there is more pipelines being built. If they can reduce the regulations and expand that, which they're going to need to do to meet their other goals, then that's going to be helpful. The thing is all of these things take time. LNG export takes 5 years to build. A pipeline takes 3 years to build. So, there is stability, and, we are going to be the leading exporter of LNG by 2023, but there's also going to be new capacity that comes on, and there's also going to be efficiencies that are there. And so, kind of defining what do you believe cheap natural gas to be? To me, it's what is natural gas compared to other energy sources. And to me, natural gas is still a great, value to the customer for what they get. And I think if you look historically over the last 10 years, you take a little macro look at this, $5 gas is still a really good price. So, that a lot of this stuff's going to take time to play out, and some of the short spurts are really more driven by weather and capacity.
Thanks so much. Yeah, compared to 30-cent power in Europe, how high can gas go and still be a good deal? So let's, God forbid we go there ourselves. But thank you guys very much. We had several questions in the Q&A. I think we answered all of them. And thanks to the chat, there was one. How's the increase in New York prices affected Pennsylvania prices? From Mark. Anybody want to touch on that, and then we can kind of wrap up.
Natural gas, I would say that, as both Peter and PJ have said, natural gas is very regionalized. So, it's just going to be the cost of whatever your capacity is into that region. So sometimes I think Pennsylvania becomes a little bit less expensive. I mean, you're going to have the NYMEX, but you're right there with the intrastate pipes, and a lot cheaper pipeline capacity cost there.
Locality of supply also being, you're not having to move it all the way across the country so transportation charges are super low. Yeah, seems like not as much of an inter-regional price drivers, but sort of macro commodity from the NYMEX, and then local regional cost drivers being the two there. Well, listen, thank you so much to the panel. Just in wrapping up today, I mean, it's been very, very insightful for me, learning about gas, learning about transactions in gas, and sort of what is the life of a consultant in dealing with customers and dealing with suppliers, and I appreciate all the different unique perspectives. Just a reminder about upcoming industry events that we'll be at. EMC is next week in Houston, semi-annual conference. I'm sure we'll see lots of the folks on today there. And then TIPA Northeast Conference will be in New York Certainly Enerex will have some representation there. And next month, our webinar will be the emergence of digital acquisition channel in retail energy. So this is something that we've seen really grow throughout COVID as a number of customer acquisition channels, door to door, and sort of in-person conversations have diminished, being replaced with digital. So web-based, app-based acquisition channels for customers, both on the broker's behalf. We have some really good examples there, as well as for suppliers, and also in the mass market space, the sort of agent direct space. So we're going to talk about all those different angles around digital customer acquisition and retail energy. One final thanks to our panel today. Really appreciate your insight. And that's a wrap. Thank you, everyone, for your attention, for your expertise. And we'll see you in the industry at an upcoming event. All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.